So we're sitting down or standing up with Alfredo, and you are pretty much the other half of the brain, as we talked about with Kenneth on one of the previous episodes. Basically, the two of you guys have designed all of the code automation in this factory, but also on the website, and it's all integrated. We know that you spend a lot of your day at this computer on the shop floor, putting together, basically building the factory, but digitally. But before we get into all of that, I want to know a little bit more about like kind of where you come from and how you got to this point.
I have sort of what you would consider like a traditional background for a software engineer. I was in a software engineering club that Kenneth, the founder, just so happened to be in years ago. And I met him through that software engineering club on Discord. And then whenever he was looking for an employee, I kind of just DM'd him on Discord, and it just kind of went from there.
So you say you're a traditional software engineer with a computer science background, but I feel like, because I'm not a coder, there's a bunch of like different little things within that big umbrella term.
Right.
What did you like to do, and how does that fit here so well?
So while at university, I always really liked the classes that were on like niche topics, so sort of like non-mainstream ideas. When I was doing my curriculum, a lot of my peers, my colleagues would end up at big tech or sort of mid-sized, well-known firms. And what really stood out was the distinction between, well, before RMFG, we had a different company name, but at that time, with how small the company was, and I really like that sort of non-traditional tech company vibe that I understood, got from the job post. And then whenever I got to meet Kenneth, the pacing that kind of he wanted to move at and sort of the scale that he wanted to go from was a lot more intriguing compared to what a traditional, or I guess like a big tech company or any sort of mid-sized firm could offer.
So what is the pacing? So talk a little bit more about what that's like here.
Right. So, at a traditional, I guess like big tech company, you'll probably be like the 1,000th or 100, like 10,000th employee, and your impact will probably be very minimal. And in most of those companies, that you're just put on a very small part of a project. Versus here, where since in a startup you want to grow as fast as possible, and you want to move as fast as possible, there's a lot more interesting work to be done. In startup, you can't really afford to move too slow, so you always have to be iterating on some design to make sure your company doesn't fall behind.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that really feeds you, let's say, for lack of a better term, emotionally. You get fulfillment from having ownership over the mechanism working or not.
Right. Especially in a startup, like let's say even like there's just like 5 software engineers. Every software engineer has 1/5 of the input into the product. Versus, let's say if you're at Google, you would be like the 10,000th engineer at the company, where your impact is probably going to be very minimal. Contrast that to a startup, especially the earlier stage, your input is going to have a higher proportional impact on the company.
Continuing with the theme impact.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the impact of the business itself as a whole is serving our customers, the community, and perhaps even the country?
I see RMFG as what I imagine the future might look like for companies. So we have a lot of software automation, which lowers the boundary for entry. So before, maybe let's say a traditional welding shop, right? Before, maybe to get somebody started in there, like they probably had to have like 10 years of experience to put them in there. But maybe because you've automated so many processes, you can get somebody that's only has 2 years of experience. So now your hiring pool is a lot larger. And because, we have a lot of automation, we can move quicker and we could be more competitive with overseas companies. And I really see this shift for the companies that survive in 50 years I imagine it's good. They're going to kind of get filtered out. Well, the ones that only survive have some sort of software automation that makes them move faster.
What are you working with today, even if maybe the audience isn't so familiar, that is pushing RMFG forward, but is still new to you?
Right. So yeah, I think, AI tools has been really a game changer when it comes to speeding software efficiency. And it's crazy compared to when I first saw them, how far they have come, how much have they improved, which is kind of crazy. From my perspective, is imagine what they'll look like in 10 years.
Imagine what we'll look like in 10 years.
Yeah. I'll be 35 in 10 years. So that's crazy.
Yeah. 25 years old and second in command, so to speak. It's kind of nice of the round table around here, it seems to me, even though this is only my 5th day here.
Right.
But, everybody has a role. We all push together.
Right.
That's what I was as you know, I was a customer here first. So I already had a kind of a lay of the land of how things work around here. And it immediately struck me as like, this is a place that I would like to work. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about kind of a general thing, what you like about working here at RMFG outside of the coding and your actual job role?
I really like the startup culture. It's set up where it feels like everybody's sort of equal in the sense that nobody is above anybody else and that everybody's input is equally as valid as anybody else's input, regardless of what their role is in the company. And I just love the startup culture and how it's been allowing me to meet other people who are founders or working for other startups.
So aside from Kenneth, you are the longest serving collaborator to start and then employee. You've been here effectively since day one. So Tell us about the arc of RMFG, where it started and how we got here.
So the company has had a long history. I joined probably maybe 2.5 years ago or maybe 2 years ago when it was called Reason Robotics. Now, before Reason Robotics, the company did have a previous history, but I wasn't involved in that part. I joined when it was called Reason Robotics. So at that point, we were working on robots as a robots as a service. So the idea was when we were Reason Robotics is that we would make programming robots, any type of robot, regardless of brand, really easy for manufacturing companies. And we did that roughly for 5 to 6 months. And I think Kenneth saw it first before I did, but he saw how it wasn't really scalable and how it was really hard to grow. Maybe because it's really hard to get in front of manufacturing companies and sell them your idea. And so at that point, we started kind of wondering what we were going to do next. And so when we were Reason Robotics, we were in a nice, cozy office in downtown Fort Worth. And immediately after that, we started working on a new idea. We started working on welding robots. And we couldn't really weld in this cozy office in downtown Fort Worth. So Kenneth had a friend that let us use his garage. And it was like late November, December. And we were like coding, writing software for robots in like 40-degree weather in a little shack in his friend's house. And that's kind of where we started getting the idea is what if we use our own software to just improve our own processes. So that's when that's when Kenneth decided that we should pivot to a manufacturing company, but we just build all of our internal software. And that's how RMFG started. And then from there, as we started to get more services, we started to kind of realize what parts we could automate and improve on.
What does RMFG look like 1 or 2 years from now?
So definitely we've done a lot of software automation, but there seems to be more room for us to grow, a lot more room for us to grow in the hardware automation. So me and Kenneth are software people, and we can do some hardware hacking, but really we need a dedicated team for that. And I see ourselves in 2 or more years really having a dedicated team that could accelerate all the hardware automation that needs to get done. And obviously, there's still going to be a lot of software automations, a lot of software improvements, automation improvements there. But I feel like there's still a lot more, there's more room for the hardware automation to grow compared to the software.
Tell the audience what you mean by hardware automation versus software automation.
Right. So I guess like let me explain like kind of what some software automations we have done.
Sure.
So we've done a lot of automation on like geometry analysis for like sheet metal parts. So for hardware automation, think about like a sheet metal rack, loader and unloader. So right now we unload and load all our sheet metal manually, but it'd be really nice if we have an automated system that does that. Or then let's say moving parts from point A to point B, at the shop we're currently at, it's a little inconvenient to have to go from one point to another, like moving parts. But what if we had an automated system that can move the parts for us?
So to put it succinctly, mainly what you guys are focused on is starting with the website. Customer goes in there, they upload their files, and it goes into your system. And it checks for bendability and basically sends the program to the bender, and the bender operator basically says, go.
Right.
There's a little bit of manual operation in there somewhere, but largely it's automated.
Right.
But beyond that, the bender, the operator of that machine then has to pick it up and take it to the next station or the next process.
Right.
And you'd like to use hardware automation to basically robotify the exchange of materials and from one service or one process to the next process and automate the whole thing.
Right. Anything we can just use to make the shop technicians a lot easier.
Right.
In general, whether that be through software or through hardware implementations, is something we want to do.
It's what a novel idea is that we're going to make our employees' lives easier and we're going to pay them more.
Right. Exactly. And
what's the benefit of that? Some of the maybe yesterday's thinking is going against that idea.
Right.
How does that work here? At the end of the day, there are going to be humans involved in all of this at some stage.
Right.
And you want to leverage their brain power and muscle power to the most critical tasks that really only a human can do.
Right.
So if you can alleviate that lift, brain power, muscle power, they can spend their best prime energy on the things that actually need a human.
Right. Okay, that's a good answer.
I can leave that in there.
Yeah.
Cool.